In the grand capital, the world was drawn in bold, clean lines. The Royal Cartographers, with their polished brass tools and precise measurements, mapped the great rivers, the tall mountains, and the sprawling cities. These were the places of importance, and on their great map, they were all that existed. But Pippa knew the world was made of smaller, softer things. She was a cartographer of a different sort. Her maps weren't of kingdoms, but of kindnesses. With a smudge of ink on her nose and a well-loved satchel at her side, she mapped the nook of whispered stories in the library corner. A hollow log in the woods she called the post office of secrets, and a particular garden bench known as the seat of 1,000 daydreams. These places were magical, but they were also fragile. If a place was forgotten, it would begin to fade, slowly consumed by the undrawn, a silent, featureless mist that smoothed over the world, erasing anything that was no longer cherished. Pippa had seen it happen. A forgotten park bench, once carved with initials, had first lost its carvings, then its splinters, and one morning was simply a smooth, featureless lump of wood, soon to be nothing at all. Her most prized possession was a small bronze compass. It didn't point north. Its needle, shaped like a tiny searching finger, shivered and spun until it found the place in the world closest to being forgotten. One afternoon, as she was mapping a puddle that held a perfect reflection of the sky, the compass began to tug at her hand with frantic energy. It was pointing to the edge of the woods, to a place fading faster than any she had ever sensed. As she packed her parchment, a scrap of a discarded map on her desk, a corner of an ocean, lonely and forgotten, trembled. With a flick of her wrist, she folded it into the shape of a bird. The moment she finished, it puffed itself up, shook its papery wings, and sprang into the air. It was Atlas, her guide. He circled her head once, then zipped off in the direction the compass pointed. Her ink was ready. It wasn't ordinary ink, but memory ink, brewed from shared stories, bottled laughter, and the warmth of 1,000 tiny, happy moments. When used, it shimmered with a faint, golden light. Atlas led her to a mossy cliff face, just as a light rain began to fall. At first, there was nothing there, but as the rain thickened, water began to trickle down the rocks, forming dozens of tiny, temporary waterfalls. The sound was not of water, but of soft, overlapping whispers. This was the Whispering Falls, a place that only existed in the rain. The undrawn was already at its edges, the whispering sound growing fainter, the mossy rocks looking smoother and less detailed. Pippa worked quickly. She didn't just draw the rocks, she mapped the path of each trickle of water. She added symbols for the different tones of the whispers. She dipped her quill in the memory ink, and as she drew, the ink captured the sound, the feeling of the cool mist, the scent of the damp earth. The lines on her parchment glowed. As she drew the final line, the whispers grew louder, more confident. She had anchored it in memory. The falls were safe. Her compass soon tugged her elsewhere, this time to the attic of the oldest house in the village. It was dusty and forgotten. The compass needle pointed to a single brilliant shaft of sunlight cutting through the gloom, illuminating a swirling universe of dust motes. Atlas landed softly on a nearby beam. Pippa knew this place, the sun dragon's lair. She laid out her parchment and began to map the sunbeam itself, its shape, its warmth, the way the golden dust inside it danced like hoarded gold. With her memory ink, She captured the feeling of quiet hope that a single beam of light can bring to a dark place. The undrawn, which had been making the attic feel smaller and colder, retreated from the brilliant light. Her final journey that week was the most urgent. The compass spun wildly, leading her to the hollow log she had once called the Post Office of Secrets. The undrawn was thick here, a gray fog licking at the edges of the log, smoothing away the texture of the bark. She could feel its memories fading, the secrets she and her friends had left for each other inside, written on curled up leaves. This time, her mapping was frantic. She drew the log, the pattern of its bark, the mushrooms growing on its side, and the little chamber inside. As she worked, she poured all her own memories of laughter and friendship into the ink. The golden lines on her map flared brightly, pushing back the gray fog with the force of a happy memory. But the undrawn was growing stronger. It was seeping into the capital itself, erasing the small alleyways and unnamed courtyards between the great buildings. Pippa knew she had to face the Royal Cartographers. She walked into the great map room, a vast chamber dominated by the enormous official map of the world. The Chief Royal Cartographer, a stern man obsessed with scale, was there, looking worried. "Chief," she said, her voice small but clear, "the city is fading." "Nonsense," he scoffed, though he couldn't hide the fear in his eyes. "All our landmarks are secure. The Great Library, the Titan Bridge, they are all perfectly mapped." "But a city isn't just its landmarks," Pippa insisted. "It's the shortcuts and the quiet corners. You've mapped the bones, but you're letting the heart fade away." Before he could argue, she took out her own small rolled-up maps. She unfurled the map of the Whispering Falls, the Sun Dragon's Lair, the Post Office of Secrets, and a dozen others. One by one, she laid them on the great map. A magical thing happened. The memory ink began to glow, its golden light spreading. Where she placed her map of the hollow log, a tiny, intricate drawing of the log bloomed into existence on the great map. Where she placed the map of the sunbeam, a point of warm, golden light began to glow. A chorus of laughter, whispers, and secrets filled the silent room. The small, forgotten places were stitching themselves into the grand tapestry of the world, anchoring it, filling in the empty spaces, and driving back the undrawn with their concentrated lights of memory. The Chief Cartographer stared, his stern expression melting into one of pure wonder. He reached out and touched the glowing spot that was the hollow log, and for a moment, he felt the joy of a shared secret. "We were wrong," he said, his voice full of awe. "The importance of a place is not its size. It's the size of the memory it holds." From that day on, everything changed. A new wing was added to the Great Hall, the Office of Small and Cherished Places. Pippa was put in charge, and cartographers were sent out not just to measure mountains, but to find and map the coziest reading nooks and the most beautiful puddles. Pippa, however, was rarely in her office. With Atlas perched on her shoulder and her magical compass in hand, she was already on her way out of the city. The compass needle was shivering, pointing toward a new, undiscovered place that was just waiting for someone to decide it was important enough to be remembered. And Pippa always would.